Do the sex.
Welcome to Masturbation Monday with me, Annette Benedetti, your host for Locker Room Talk and Chats. This is your invitation to join me for coffee in bed and a candid conversation about the masturbation practice I'm developing to support my mental, physical, and emotional health and help manifest my dreams. Masturbation Monday is a guide to self-pleasure, better sex, and using the power of the pussy to open new doors to a better life.
Ring loop.
Today's Masturbation Monday topic is the most common sexual fantasies women have. That is what I'm focusing on. In order to have a fantastic, orgasmic, masturbation-filled life, I would argue you have to also have a pretty healthy sexual fantasy life. So this got me to thinking about all of the shame I think women carry around some of their sexual desires, fantasies, thoughts, maybe even dreams and hopes. So I thought it would be interesting to take some time to research what the most common fantasies were that women have when it comes to sex, and to share that information so that perhaps some of you out there feel maybe a little less alone. If you're concerned because you have a fantasy that you think means something shameful about yourself, what I'm hoping to do is help people realize these are very common. Fantasies are fantasies, right? They're just thoughts, dreams. You don't have to ever move them into reality. They don't say anything about you. Many fantasies can't possibly come true, but yeah, the fantasy realm is this really fun, playful realm to be in. So what I did was I dove into the research and I came up with the top 5 fantasies women admit to having. But then I decided I wanted to take this a little bit further, right? And I wanted to see how what the research says matches up with the women I'm able to connect with. So I sent out the bat signal to women in my community. And I said, hey, I want to do this episode on sexual fantasies. Would you all be willing to send me anonymously your sexual fantasies? And so then I was able to read them and see how they match up with, the top 5 that are at least out there on the internet. So today, what I'm going to do is share with you the top 5 most common sexual fantasies women have. And then I'm going to give you a little sexy peek into maybe a personal reading of some sexy fantasies from women I'm directly connected to. Now, I'm going to also preface this with the fact that most of the women who submitted their fantasies to me are queer or bisexual. They do not primarily identify as straight, heterosexual. So there is that. Just to be transparent, my community tends to lean towards being more queer. So just keep that in mind and enjoy listening to their stories as much as I enjoyed reading them. So grab your coffee and let's get ready to talk about masturbation and women's sexual fantasies. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our libido boosting sponsor, Promescent. Spice things up in the bedroom with their delay spray. It has changed the game for over 500,000 men worldwide. It's like a secret weapon for lasting longer, but Promescent offers so much more. It is your one-stop shop for all things sexual wellness, backed by a ton of medical experts. And they're all about privacy, discreet packaging, free shipping in the US for orders over $20, and a no-risk 60-day money-back guarantee. Best of all, when you visit promescent.com/locker room talk, that's promescent.com/locker room talk, you save 15% off your first order at checkout. That's promescent.com/locker room talk for 15% off. All right, guys, let's just kick this off with the top 5 sexual fantasies women have. And this is according to the Journal of Sexual Medicine and some other random studies that were significant. I wanted to give you the most accurate information. So number one, unsurprisingly, is being dominated. Women fantasize about being dominated, giving up control, being taken by a man. I would venture to say maybe being spanked. And I said by a man, but that was not specified. So in some way, they want to be dominated by another person. The second most common fantasy, to probably everyone's delight, is having a threesome. Having a threesome. Now, it was not specified whether that threesome was two women and a man, like the gender of the setup was not specified. Here's what was interesting, though. 57% of women had fantasies about more than 3 people at once. More than 3 people at once. And from what I could tell, that study seemed to suggest that the turn on was the idea of being the centerpiece of a group of people fawning over them. So the fantasy isn't just about like more than 3 people having sex. It's about these people sort of having sex with the woman and like pleasuring her, which I get it, ladies. I'm right in there with you. Why wouldn't you fantasize about that? 59% of women, whether they were heterosexual or identified as queer, lesbian, etc., fantasize about having sex with another woman. That's right. Straight women fantasize about having sex with another woman. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? So on to the next. Sex in public. That is a common fantasy. A little bit of voyeurism. Maybe getting caught. Maybe being seen. I'm sure that this fantasy has offshoots of sexy possibilities. And then number 5 was sex with a stranger. Sex with a stranger. I get it. It's someone novel, exciting. This fantasy makes sense to me. So we went through them: being dominated, having a threesome, having more than a threesome, right? Sex with another woman who doesn't want to do that. Sex in public, super fun and exciting adrenaline rush. Sex with strangers. So how did it match up with the fantasies that were turned into me? Let's get started. One of my close personal friends submitted to me that her primary fantasy is a sapphic orgy, basically an orgy full of women fucking. So, right? Fits right into our top 5. And also, who wouldn't want that? Group sex with a bunch of beautiful ladies. I'm here for it. So that's one of the fantasies that was submitted to me. Now, some of the fantasies that were submitted were a little bit of a story form. So I'm going to read them to you. I may change the wording a little bit just so that, YouTube, where you can go and listen to this and watch my other videos, doesn't shut me down 100%. But I'm going to go ahead and read these fantasies that were sent to me. So the next one that was submitted, she says, I have challenges relaxing into being pleasured. I always feel I need to hop up and tend to another person. So I will go into space in my head where I am the queen or some sort of royalty being pleasured by her slave. It's extra hot if the king is watching in the doorway or being pleasured by another servant in anticipation of him coming over and being the grand finale. All this is very odd because in reality, I'm the sub in our relationship. So it's a total twist on reality. I love this fantasy because it really leans into the fantasy part of fantasies. When I read to you the top fantasies before, they were very real world-ish, but fantasy is fantasy, and it can be things that are otherworldly or from a different time or dimension if you're into sci-fi. And this was a great example of that. King, queen, slaves pleasuring you, all of that stuff. She also submitted another fantasy. And she says, the other common one for me is kind of a hands-made tale, and I'm the servant in that one. But the wife is so nurturing and makes sure that he, I assume this is her husband, gives me all the pleasure before she lets him have his way with me. So there's, again, a very fantasy, not reality at all based, hopefully, fantasy that's out there. Moving on. The next fantasy that was submitted to me goes like this. Okay, so we meet at a dog park with our dogs who hit it off. I love that's how it starts. We chat it up and decide to get dinner. We stay out way longer than we meant to and end up walking along the river. Then, as we sit on a bench at the park, we make out a bit. The next night, we go dancing, and in the middle of a hot song, we decide to get some air on the rooftop where we make out again. All hands, tongues, and heavy breathing. I get down on my knees, and I ask if it's okay if I kiss her, kitty. She says yes, already parting her legs for me. As I prop her leg on a chair near us, I can feel her shake with need. So, that's the fantasy. Clearly, girl on girl stuff that fits into our top 5. The next one is interesting. It goes like this. She says, a woman sucking my, quote, bean or clit in the stereotypical way that people give head, i.e. on her knees while I'm standing and her looking up at me. That was a fantasy. That again fits into our top 5. And then this next one, the Eiffel Tower. Gotta go look up that one, where I'm on my hands and knees while someone is penetrating me from behind and I'm giving them oral. So again, we're looking at sort of the group dynamic where the woman is the center of the attention. This next fantasy I thought was interesting. How many of you have this? Forced orgasms, where I'm bound in some way and someone's forcing me to have orgasms over and over again to the point of almost agony. Huh? That's awesome. Now that's a fantasy that could become reality. I love that one. The next one, and this is by the same person, so it's her take on the forced orgasmic state, and then she's sort of playing on that. She says, this one goes both ways, where I fantasize about being the one in control and the one on the receiving end. So she likes to play with both roles. Being in public, well, one person has a remote controlled vibe or a clit stimulator, and the other person is turning it on and off and higher and lower, and the receiving person is having to act normal so nobody knows. Now that is a fantasy that I think could easily be moved into reality, and that's hot. Does it fit into our top 5? Maybe not. Oh, public. What we did say, public intimacy was a one of them. So yeah, the next one goes like this. So my biggest sexual fantasy right now is going on a vacation, meeting a woman and hitting it off, taking her back to the room and just getting caught up in the passion of the moment, exploring each other's bodies. And my male partner catches us. They get caught in the act. We let him watch for a while, and then he eventually joins in on the fun. We both go down on the woman together. We do some other pleasurable things, and I end up taking him inside while she pleasures my bean until I have an orgasm. That would be extremely hot to me. And she says, and it felt very strange to share this with somebody I don't know, which is cute. But, you guys know me. I hear this stuff all day long. So the next fantasy that was submitted to me is actually a romantic, sensual fantasy. She says, I fantasize about someone I know, not a real person, just Fictionally, this person would be somebody I knew, and we're both incredibly attracted to each other, and random things stop us from acting on or acknowledging it. The pining and the glances and the slow burn of wanting someone. Just the concept is super intriguing and exciting to me. Now, this one's interesting to me because I feel like this is a very real world experience and fantasy, and something I think a lot of us yearn for at times, like wanting that sort of sensual connection with somebody that I want but I can't really have. And you have that pining feeling. That's sexy. That's sexy. I love it. The next one that was submitted: 4 single femmes, each alone in a bar, drowning in their sorrows. One goes over to the jukebox and plays "I Hate Myself for Loving You" and starts rage dancing and screaming the lyrics. The other looks up, realizing the catharsis happening, and also begins to rage dance and scream lyrics. The song ends and they collapse into each other's arms, laughing and crying. One catches another's eye and another's eye, and they have a big sexy time on the dance floor. Pack U-Hauls and all move in together the next day and live happily ever after. And she says, "This is my Golden Girl fan fiction origin story." Oh God, that's a great one. So again, we've got the group sex, we've got women, sex with other women. And then actually a good friend of mine submitted this one, and I thought this is pretty heartfelt. And I wonder how many women out there, when they hear this, will be like, yeah, that's really something simple I want. She says, "All I've ever wanted was a nice motel at the beach with a hot tub in the room, followed by sensual massages, kissing, and slow sex." Slow sex. How simple, right? Simple and romantic. So one of the themes that I feel came or has come up a lot in these is sensuality and romance. I think women want that, even if they want sort of the kinky stuff. And I've got one more for y'all. This one is a perfect note to end on because she says, "This is my Valentine's fantasy." And another thing she adds to this that I think will resonate with a lot of women out there and partners of women out there. She says, "Understand this isn't any type of wild fantasy. I'm a single mom to 4 teens. If I had a boyfriend or husband," she says, "her fantasy is waking up to my significant other touching me. With a jolt of pleasure, I'm fully awakened. Looking over at this masterpiece of a man, I beg him to kiss me. Our morning unfolds with multiple hours of gentle but orgasmic, passionate lovemaking. The day continues with a normal schedule. Little surprises would arrive in the form of naughty texts and photos to tease each other, with the intention of building those deep, primal, lustful urges. He'd bring me flowers and take me to dinner somewhere nice. I dress in a way that's socially acceptable and yet still provocative enough that he'd have trouble keeping his hands to himself. Light teasing, little touches would make his heart race. After dinner, he'd lead me to either his place or a hotel room. In the privacy of our own space, I'd immediately begin to undress while kissing him. Our night would be filled with incredible, intense BDSM sex." Well, there you guys go. It's our number one fantasy. "A choker and leash on me, a whip in his hands, a ball gag, and the only pain that can satisfy my inner freak. All of this intertwined with moments of sweet laughter and cuddling that eases my soul." That is her Valentine's Day fantasy. Well, that fantasy covered a lot of ground. Pretty hot. There is love, romance, BDSM. I think that's a solid fantasy. I found reading these when I got them initially just very resonant. And I feel like even in this handful of fantasies that were sent my way, you get a really good feel of the breadth of what fantasy can be in a woman's mind. And of course, Masturbation Monday for me is all about exploring my sexuality as a woman, the things that excite me, that bring me pleasure, that inspire me. And fantasy is inspiring. Look at how creative some of these fantasies were. It was interesting to look at what the top fantasies were, because I thought, well, yeah, I love group sex fantasies. And in my group sex fantasies, yeah, I'm definitely, I got a little bit of spotlight on me, and it's the idea of people really wanting me. I don't think sex in public is my thing. I definitely don't have that fantasy myself, but you bet I've got fantasies where there's domination and BDSM. That's just hot stuff. But I think what's interesting is just to see how common all of this is from the research, and then how much the fantasies submitted to me matched up with the research. Now, if you're out there and you're listening to this and you have a fantasy that I didn't read, or that you think is more common and should have maybe made those top 5, I want you to send it to me. I'm interested to hear what you're all using for inspiration when it comes to your masturbation practice. And I hope that maybe some of these fantasies will inspire your next Masturbation Monday practice. It's what they should do. Make it more fun, make it more orgasmic. And maybe by hearing other people's fantasies, your mind will open up a little bit, and you'll let yourself get a little weirder, a little freakier in the way you think when you're touching yourself and you're getting aroused. Maybe you'll find that you've got a new interest. But I'm curious, what do you think of these fantasies? Do you think that there's something else out there that's very common that wasn't mentioned? Let me know. I want to hear your thoughts. You know how to get a hold of me, Annette, ANNETTE at sheexploreslife.com. Until next time, I'll see you in the locker room. Cheers.